Well, good evening. How are you? It's just gone 9 o'clock here in Portstewart in Northern Ireland, and I'm back as usual at this time reading another chapter from my memoirs. And tonight, would you believe we are up to chapter 13 of All Growed Up? So thanks very much as you join me. Good to have you along. And what I'll be doing is I'll be saying hello as we go through the chapter. I'll take a wee break in the middle and a chat to the end. Facebook have changed Facebook Live tonight, so it's all looking slightly different. So I'm just keeping a wee eye on how it all works, getting used to the new format. Anyway, thanks for joining me. And if you want to say hello, just give me a wee shout and I'll say hello later. But this is chapter 13 of All Grown Up, To Be or Not to Be. To be or not to be? That was the question, so it was. I was well aware that the role of Hamlet would be a far cry from Riff, the leader of the Jets in West Side Story, but every great actor had to prove his versatility. Mr. Hudson had proved this when he retired from being a butler in Upstairs Downstairs to become the head of CI5 in The Professionals. Peter Davison had made the interstellar leap from a vet from the Yorkshire Dales in All Creatures Great and Small to a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, and there was no better acting role in the whole universe. The only problem I anticipated was learning all my lines. I had studied Hamlet for my English A level, and there was no doubt that Hamlet had an awful lot of words to say. Remembering all of these lines would be a major challenge. But with my experience of previous productions of Shakespeare at Belfast Royal Academy and learning the answers to the questions in the Presbyterian Catechism, I was certain I was up to the task. Of course, I wasn't so presumptuous as to be certain I would land the part of Hamlet himself, but there were lots of other good parts in the play, such as Hamlet's best mate, Horatio, as well as Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. When I arrived for the auditions in the drama studio, I looked around the unlit room and didn't recognise a single one of the faces in the shadows. I sat down beside a tall student in training shoes who introduced himself in an English accent as Mark Broder. He liked football and Kate Bush, but he was dead on. One by one, all of the aspiring Hamlets and Ophelias were invited forward to read a short extract from the play. The director was a suitably eccentric looking English lecturer with an English accent, long hair, a beard, and the compulsory corduroy trousers. He called out the names of each hopeful actor in turn, and we all had to come forward and read a few lines on the darkened stage. I was feeling slightly nervous, but I was determined to draw on my newfound confidence and take the audition in my stride. However, as the aspiring thespians got up in front of me to audition, I noticed to my dismay, nearly all of them had posh English accents. Most of the students auditioning were from England and spoke proper all the time, but even the students were from Northern Ireland invented posh English accents to read their lines. Everyone was trying to sound like Lord Olivier and Sir Ralph Thingamy. The only exception was a short, thin, and prematurely bald student called Alex, who dispensed with the script and just performed the gist of it in an American accent. He's a method actor, explained Mark. I had no idea what a method actor was. I did know a few methody actors who had performed in the school play in Methodist College in Belfast, but this was very different, and I was intrigued. Is Roger Moore a method actor? I asked Mark. No, Tone. Roger Moore is not a method actor. I was amazed at how quickly English people transformed me into Tone. Jack Nicholson is a method actor. They imagine themselves completely into the role and they stay in character, even off stage. I knew instantly that I wanted to become a method actor, but as my turn approached, I wondered whether or not I should put on an English accent for the audition. I was quite capable of doing a good English accent. You might disagree from what you've just heard. Everyone said I could do a wonderful impersonations of Frank Spencer, Roger Moore, and Orville the Duck. But as a committed socialist from Northern Ireland, I decided that if I were to be Hamlet, I would bring an authentic working class Belfast accent to the part. After all, Hamlet was the Prince of Denmark. If anything, he would have spoken English with a Scandinavian accent, like Agnetha from ABBA, but not quite so sexy. Hamlet wasn't from the south of England any more than he was from West Belfast. So I decided to make a statement by auditioning in my normal Northern Ireland accent, resisting the temptation to turn my eights into eights and my nows into nows. Good luck, Mark Broder said as I got up on the stage. I was wearing my new romantic suede ankle boots and knitted leg warmers. I hoped I looked arty enough and this would assist me in getting the part, or any part for that matter. I took a deep breath. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them to die, to sleep. Okay, that's enough. Thank you. The director stopped me before I'd even begun to emote. I couldn't tell whether I had impressed him so much that he didn't need to hear any more, or whether he had quickly decided that I was weak. His long hair covered his eyes, so I couldn't tell what he was thinking. He scribbled down a few notes about my performance and invited Mark forward to audition next. I sat down and listened as Mark read the same lines, only more confidently and in a proper English accent, and I immediately began to feel inferior. Maybe it was because the news headlines on the BBC were always read in this accent, or perhaps it was because the Queen and Mrs. Thatcher talked this way and they represented authority and always being right. I realised then that I was not destined to play Hamlet with a Belfast accent. What was I doing here anyway? What was a wee lad from up the Shankill doing auditioning for Shakespeare? Maybe I just needed to catch myself on a bit. If my big brother had been here to see me, I knew he would have said, "Why's a bap, you big fruit?" My only real experience of Hamlet was the cigars my father used to chain smoke. However, my hopes were kept alive by the fact that it was a very long play with lots of speaking parts, and it would probably be okay for some of the less important words to be spoken in a Northern Ireland accent. Maybe I would be awarded a lesser role and I could use it to experiment with method acting. At the same time, the following week, the aspiring cast members gathered once more to hear the cast list. I hadn't given the audition a great deal of thought during the 7-day wait, as I was distracted by an essay on sexuality and the femme fatale in film noir, and an argument in the Christian Union over whether it was okay to fundraise for the Third World on a Sunday. I had been in this nerve-wracking position many times before, but as famous actors always told Terry Wogan on BBC One, it's all just a part of the industry. During my school days, I'd been given the devastating news that I had not been cast as either Tom or Huck in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and I still recall the occasion when the part of Tony in West Side Story was not given to me, despite my name and talent. I had experienced disappointment before, so I'd learned to lower my expectations. I clearly wasn't English enough to play Hamlet, but perhaps in this groundbreaking new production, Horatio, at least, could hail from West Belfast. As Hamlet and Ophelia and Gertrude and Claudius were announced, I could feel my heart pounding with excitement. But once we got past Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, I realised there was very little need for excitement. When it was announced that Mark Broder had been given the part of Horatio, I was disappointed, but I had to admit that Mark was more confident in English than me, and he would probably do a better job. I began to fear the ultimate humiliation of a non-speaking part. Was I destined to become an extra in Hamlet? I hadn't been given a lowly non-speaking part since I was a sheep in the nativity play at Spring Hill Primary School. I could never become a proper method actor if I'd no words to say. This was going to be embarrassing. Everyone would assume I lacked talent rather than an English accent. My big brother would slag me desperately and say I should play a tree because my acting was wooden. And Leslie would be left wondering if my previous triumph in West Side Story had been nothing short of miscasting. Oh, it's saying, sorry, we're having trouble with playing this video. Let me just see how we're doing. Can you still see me? Can you maybe just tell me? Not sure what's happened. Sorry, we're having trouble playing this video. Oh, you can't still see me. Okay. It's saying that you can't, so I'll just keep going. Can you still see me? Good. Lovely. Leslie's confirmed. I'm still live. Okay, I'm back. But it's not a good picture, but I'm still here. Okay, thank you. I'll keep going. Don't worry, Tone, you'll get a part. You weren't that bad, said Mark. Now the sentries, said the director, flicking his unkempt hair and pausing dramatically as if anyone cared at this stage. Marcellus Tony Macaulay. I looked around. Sorry, Marcellus Tom Macaulay. I looked around the room for a Tom before raising my hand shyly. Do you mean Tony? I asked. Yes, you, the director replied, as if I should be ecstatic. Not only was I a mere sentry, nobody even knew my bloody name. As soon as the last parts had been handed out, I fled to the library with my copy of Hamlet, and I looked up the part of Marcellus to discover how many, if any, lines I had to speak. To my delight, I discovered that I'd quite a lot to say in Act 1, Scene 1. I may have been a lowly sentry, but I actually got to spot King Hamlet's ghost and offered to strike at it with my partisan. This was similar to Luke Skywalker striking at Darth Vader with a lightsaber. Over the page, and there I was again, albeit in a much lesser extent, in Scene 2, helping Horatio to tell Hamlet about the ghost. Was I really going to appear in every single scene in the play? I was absent from Scene 3, but there I was again, in Scene 4, and I got to say one of the most famous lines of the whole play. I'd even quoted this line in my English A-level exam. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. I practiced it, being careful not to say rotten as rattan in my Belfast accent. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. It may have been just one line, but this was crucial to Hamlet. It was as crucial in this play as a honk from Chewbacca in Star Wars. The role of Marcellus definitely had potential for method acting. I could imagine I was a real sentry for weeks and weeks and really get into the part. I would have to imagine that rather being a Protestant pacifist from West Belfast, I was a weapon-carrying soldier from Denmark. I turned the pages excitedly. There I was again, in Scene 5. In Act 2, it seemed that Shakespeare was giving me a wee rest. However, when I got to Act 3, I was devastated to discover that Marcellus did not make another appearance for the rest of the play. The sentry's job was done, and my final line was to be spoken in Act 1, Scene 5. "We have sworn, my lord, already." My heart sank like a badly skimmed stone in Loch Ness. I wanted to swear already, my lord. If I had been Shakespeare, I would have brought Marcellus back to say, "There's still something rotten in the state of Denmark, so there is," at least once later on in the play, just to remind the audience of the importance of those words for A-level English exams. Just because William Shakespeare was the greatest writer ever didn't mean he wasn't capable of the odd mistake. The writers of Dallas used this technique all the time to remind you that Lucy Ewing was still out there somewhere plotting against JR, even though she hadn't been in an episode for ages. As it turned out, our wonderful director decided that, contrary to the script, the Centuries should return to the stage to emote at all the blood and guts and wonderful acting by Hamlet and co in Act 5. Although this directorial innovation brought me back on stage for an extra 20 minutes at the end, it also meant I had to hang around for nearly 2 hours between my on-stage appearances, and this was far too long for a method acting novice to stay in character. The result was that I couldn't just go home for a fish supper after delivering "Something is rotten in the state of Denmark" in Act 1. The director pointed out that if people like Tom do a good job this year, they will get a better part next year. So I decided I would just have to persevere, and if I learned all my lines and performed well, and the director learned my name at some stage, there was still hope for a leading part in next year's production of Belfast, of Shakespeare. The director explained his vision for reinventing Hamlet for the 1980s with a great deal of passion and hair flicking. Our new visionary production would introduce Shakespeare to the dynasty generation. The stage would be specially built in the design of a chessboard, and this modern set design would contrast with plush traditional costumes with good shoulder pads. As it turned out, plush didn't stretch to the attire of the Sentries. I wore Wellington boots and a helmet so you couldn't see my face, and I carried a pike made from a broom handle. "Something is rotten in the state of my costume," I said to Mark Broder at the first dress rehearsal as he entered stage left in tights and velvet finery. The rehearsals continued for weeks. Poor Hamlet had so many lines to learn, I'm sure he had to give up studying for his degree, and our director displayed all the pain and anguish of a tortured artist as he strove to draw finely honed performances from his young troupe. Only the elfin beauty of sweet Ophelia and an exchange of sarcastic jokes between Horatio and myself lightened the most tragic scenes and the most difficult rehearsals. I found some of my fellow actors to be rather self-satisfied, and this always sounded worse in an English accent. The banter between Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in between scenes was almost Shakespearean in ribald cleverness. This gave me an opportunity to introduce Mark Broder to some Northern Ireland terminology when I had to explain to him that, as far as I was concerned, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern were a pair of books. He laughed so hard his plastic sword rattled in his scabbard. Finally, we were ready for our first performance. The lovely Leslie from up the country, Aaron, and several Heathers from Portadown came to watch the premiere in the Riverside Theatre, which was beautifully situated overlooking the River Bann, albeit on the east. I was able to change out of my costume to talk to the audience during the interval, as it would be several hours before I was required back on stage for the bloodbath. This critical analysis of the performance provided by my friends was enlightening. "Not quite West Side Story, is it?" smirked Aaron. "It's a wee bit boring, Tony, so it is," commented a Heather from Portadown. "You don't suit them there welly boots, and I can't see your face," said Leslie. Some of the other comments I overheard during the interval were less encouraging, including one man who made it clear that he would not be staying for the second half. The most pretentious crap I've ever seen in my whole life, he remarked as he ran for the door. I was strangely reassured by this insult. If only the director had been brave enough to cast an upper shankle Shakespearean method actor in the role of Hamlet, this could have been a much more successful and gritty production. There was nothing pretentious about a Hamlet with a Belfast accent. I tried to convince Mark Broder that a socialist interpretation of Shakespeare would have made a West Belfast Hamlet a real possibility. In fact, I argued there was no reason why Hamlet had to be white or male for that matter either. Cagney and Lacey had already proved that women could be heroes too. Yeah, so in socialist Shakespeare, the Prince of Denmark could be a Chinese lesbian in a wheelchair. Is that what you're saying? After the initial run at the new University of Ulster, I assumed that Hamlet was over. But to my surprise, we began to receive invitations to perform internationally. I'm going to stop there and say hello. I hope you can see me. I think you can see me okay. I can't see myself. Maybe that's a good thing. But let me see what people are saying. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So let me just say hello. So, hi, good evening. Good evening, Nigel McComb. Hi, Jim Poole. Good to have you both along. Hi, Kenneth Glenville. Missed the last two, but back now to live status. Good for you, Kenneth. Good to have you back. Hello, Angela and Keith Montgomery, regulars. Lovely to have you. Great to have you, Evelyn Brown, alongside brother Nigel in Oz. Nigel in Oz. Good evening, Norma Fleming and Anne Riding. You're enjoying all those accents, are you, Anne? That's good. Thank you. Glad to hear today, says Marty McCauley. Hi, Michael McKinley, Senior, never misses. Good to see you. Hi, also Betty O'Riordan, a wee bit late chatting to your grandson in New York. Lovely to have you. Hello, Elaine Bonner, and good evening, Roberta Robinson Curran. Hi, Norma Harrison, glad you're enjoying it. Brendan Toll, hope you're enjoying this chapter. Good evening. Who else have we got? Anne Kirk. And good evening, Marlene Williamson and Susan Wilgar. All the regulars are here. Loving your facial expressions. Oh, that means you can't see me then. I can't see myself, but you can see me. Yes, you're saying no problem. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for letting me know that. I just wasn't sure because I can't see myself tonight. Great, thank you all. So thanks for letting me know there. Hello, Fiona Hawkins. Good to have you along too. Hope you're all well there. Hi, Neve, Sahafian. It's a little hazy, but you can see me good. Won't play my iPad. Someone saying, yeah, there's a new system on Facebook Live tonight. That's why I was a wee bit late coming on. But I'm glad you're able to see me okay. We'll see. Love the Belfast bakes and the broad accent, says Norma. Bakes of Belfast. And someone says all the silence listeners have come out tonight. Glad you're enjoying it. Orla O'Sullivan, hope you're all doing well. The O'Sullivans are all well. Starring Tom Macaulay, yes. Okay, so let's see. Now, we've already done this in Coleraine, but our legendary performance of Hamlet is about to go international. After the initial run at the new University of Ulster, I assumed that Hamlet was over. But to my surprise, we began to receive invitations to perform internationally. The Drama Society was asked to visit universities in La Roche-sur-Yon in France and then in Erlangen in Germany. This was even more impressive than when the Westy Disco Choir had been invited to sing in a church in Edinburgh. And so off we went as travelling artistes, performing all around Europe with our chessboard stage and my Wellington boots and helmet. Our success overseas was stunning. It seemed that the fewer words of English an audience could speak, the more they appreciated our performances. And I knew they weren't just feeling sorry for us because we were from war-torn Northern Ireland, because most of the cast were actually from England. I got to tell people in France and Germany that something was rotten in the state of Denmark. If this trend continued, I would soon be telling people in the state of Denmark itself that something was rotten in it. The travelling was tiring though, and our schedule was gruelling. It wasn't easy being an actor on the road on world tour. I finally understood what life was like for Roger Moore when a new Bond movie came out. But I held my pike erect through every performance and bowed graciously at the multilingual plaudits. Unfortunately, Mark Broder decided not to go on the overseas tours and they replaced him with a different English Horatio who wouldn't speak to me. Few of the other principal actors deigned to speak to me either, even when travelling and living together for weeks at a time, so I understood the loneliness of the travelling artiste. This was so different from my trips abroad with the Westie Disco, where you knew everyone and the crack was 90. It was true that none of my fellow actors ever got sent home for drinking too much, or starting a fight in the street, or assaulting a foreign police officer, but at least the Westie Disco crowd was warm and friendly. I did eventually get to know some of the other supporting actors a little bit better on the boats and buses we took and in the hostels we stayed in. I learned things on this tour that 1,000 Christian Union trips to Greystones Conference Centre down south couldn't not have taught me. I learned from one actor that it probably wasn't a good idea to go with a prostitute in Paris after you'd had too much to drink, as you would feel completely minging for the next week and possibly even longer. Benny and Bjorn had been writing an exciting new musical about playing chess, and the first song they had released said that one night in Bangkok makes a hard man humble. It was clear that one night in Paris could have a similar effect. Another fellow thespian who was very happy and relaxed all the time explained to me that the odd smelling cigarettes he liked to smoke so much were not, in fact, regular Benson and Hedges. I decided to have a serious conversation with Byron Drake about him smoking marijuana in the toilet of my flat and telling me that he was smoking menthol cigarettes to help with his sinuses. I went to the cinema in France where they watched films entirely in French without subtitles. I saw an award winning film called La Balance that everyone said was hard hitting and gritty and très bien. The movie was all about racketeers and police informers and gang leaders and murder. It was just like Belfast in French. By the end of term, our production of Hamlet was judged a masterpiece of theatre and a Europe-wide success. It was decided that the Drama Society would build on this success with The Comedy of Errors, a Shakespearean comedy full of farce, slapstick, and mistaken identity. I knew I had paid my dues as a sentry in Hamlet. Now the director would give me my big break, as he had promised, and I could finally have a wee go at method acting. All those hours standing in my wellies with pike in my hand, emoting at Hamlet's every word and tolerating smug, sarcastic asides had surely earned me a leading part in the next production. But when the time for casting arrived, to my great disappointment, I was cast once again as an officer. It was deeply ironic that the only teenage pacifist in West Belfast should be repeatedly cast as a soldier in arms, or at least in Wellington boots. This time, when I searched through the text, I discovered that I had even fewer lines than Marcellus. Once again, all of the clever English students had got all the good parts, and the director had failed to recognise the bright light of talent shining before him. Either that or I was just a weak actor. I concluded that something was rotten in the state of the Dramatic Society. I retained my dignity and declined the part. The director told several of the principals that he was disappointed that Tom had given up. In spite of all my efforts, my acting career had come to an end. I abandoned my ambitions to be the next Roger Moore and gave up my hope of becoming a great method actor like Jack Nicholson. Of course, I was aware that I could have a successful future after acting, like Ronald Reagan did in America, but I knew then that I would never replace Peter Davison as the Doctor. I had once again tried my very best, and once again it simply wasn't good enough. It was not to be, so it wasn't. So there you are. That is chapter 13 of All Growed Up. Thanks very much for listening this evening. I hope I'll get the wee technical issues. I'll get used to all this by tomorrow night. In the meantime, say hello to a few other people. Hi, Tony on a hot day in Louisville, Kentucky. 91 degrees. My goodness, Mark Macaulay. That sounds good to me. Or Max, that sounds probably a bit too hot for me. Yeah, that would swelter you. That really would swelter you. And good evening, Norma Sloan. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Evelyn Brown. Thanks everyone for listening. I'll be back. I'll be back again same time tomorrow night. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and stay positive. Bye bye.